Hey, welcome back, everybody. We're going to drill into something that actually has come up several times already today, and that is the importance of design. I think we've already heard from this stage some really interesting bits and pieces that we're going to be able to drill a lot deeper into. For instance, the importance of sheer speed on mobile conversion rates. I think one of the rules of thumb, those of you who go back as far as I do on the web back to the early 90s, may remember that early web designers used to use this rule of thumb that for every click, count on losing half your audience. Every click you require in an experience will lose half of your audience. On mobile, that becomes even more critical. I think, as we've already seen, a few people mention this morning, is that understanding the importance of the seamlessness between the online brand and the mobile brand, understanding the ways in which the flow of the experience works, and one of the amazing, maybe most curious things about mobile is how much the little things really matter here. That little screen seems to amplify every tiny thing that people do in interacting. There is a dark art emerging, perhaps, about making a better mobile point of sale. Where are the choke points? What are we learning about what works and what doesn't? What are the places where major brands are thinking next about how to optimize this experience and really make that thing that we keep hearing again and again, that seamlessness, that flow. To take the lead on this, we have someone who actually has designed a pretty cool tablet app. I don't know if any of you have used the coffee table app. Any of you have seen this app? Honestly, I'm not paid to do this stuff. I mention these things because I'm an enthusiast of good mobile design, because I spend a good deal of my night just tapping through this stuff. So when I come across an app like Coffee Table, it's really cool. It's a catalog of catalogs. Ben Choi is the CEO of the company. It's one of the most popular, I think, beautifully designed apps, catalog of catalogs on the iPad. It hosts some of the top catalogs in the space, from Neiman Marcus to Land's End. Ben is himself a digital vet. He directed Southeast Mobile Strategy for Yahoo for a number of years. Later worked at the early advertising network, now much larger advertising network, Graystripe. Please welcome Ben Choi.
Thanks, Steve. This is exciting. I think user experience has come up several times this morning, and I think it'll be a fun panel. I'm looking forward to it. As Steve mentioned, I'm Ben Choi. I'm the CEO of Coffee Table. We are the top-rated catalog shopping app. Steve, I will pay you later, I guess, for the endorsement. I'm also, I also have wear a different hat. I'm a venture partner at a venture capital firm called Maveron. Howard Schultz started us over a decade ago, and our focus is in consumer-facing investments. E-commerce is a primary thesis. Our first investment was eBay, second investment drugstore.com, more recently Zulily and Groupon, which was more popular to talk about and brag about a year ago. This panel is interesting because I think when we started at Maveron investing in e-commerce really was a parallel experience. It was a new context to create commerce activities for consumers. I think what mobile has done, now that it's finally arrived, mobile has blurred the lines of what those consumer contexts are. The phone is always with us. It's in the store. It's with us on the go. And the tablet, this beautiful, magical new device, is in new places that laptops weren't when we started e-commerce over 10 years ago. It's on the couch with us. It's in bed. Some will admit it's in the toilet with us. I mean, it's with us at all times in places where the laptop wasn't before, and that creates interesting and new design challenges. And that's, I think, the topic for the panel. So what we'll talk about is best and worst user experience design practices around mobile, and specifically how mobile changes the consideration set for m-commerce. Before we go into introducing the panel, I know this was done once before. I just want to get it level set again to know who's in the audience and introduce yourselves. So quick show of hands if you're with an agency. Great. And if you're on the client side. Okay. And then if you're a technology vendor. Great. And then VCs in the audience. Okay, great. Phew. Okay, looking forward to this panel. One more note. The panel will be more fun if you guys will interrupt us. You can yell out and object, or you can raise your hand politely and ask for a mic. Both are acceptable, but it'll be more fun for all of us if you do that. Questions or just comments as well. So why don't we just go down the line first and just introduce ourselves briefly and our background, and specifically our experience around and focus around UX and mobile.
Sure.
Hi. My name is Brett Leary. I'm a VP of Mobile at Digitas. I sit in our Boston office. We're a pretty big digital integrated agency. I have the pleasure of working with clients such as American Express, Dunkin' Donuts, Goodyear Tire, and a variety of other clients. And I also oversee, in our Boston office, we have a mobile shopping showcase, and it's kind of a show and tell for grown-ups to come in and play with these technologies and the tactics that a lot of you in the retail space are deploying to impact the path to purchase. And so I'll talk a little bit about that experience today.
I'm Jeremy Lockhorn, VP of Emerging Media at Razorfish. I have been with Razorfish for 15 years, so I've seen a lot of change and a lot of exciting new things. And for the last 6 years or so, I've been in this emerging media role, focused entirely on figuring out new things like mobile and interactive television and connected TVs and game consoles and on down the line. And then I function kind of as an evangelist and a consultant and an educator, both for our clients directly and for our teams internally, and have been fortunate enough to work with some of our leading clients like Mercedes-Benz, Best Buy, Nike, and kind of on down the line. And hopefully we'll have some interesting things to share with you guys.
Joao Machado, Director of Mobile over at OMD, specifically Airwave, which is our mobile consultancy within the agency. Been there a little over 2 years, working with several of our clients, ranging from financial with Visa, which is obviously very closely integrated into this whole discussion from a lot of different perspectives, HP, Activision, FedEx, Toys R Us, Warner Brothers, just 17 clients really that we focus on right now within the roster. Been mobile since not very long, 2007, but the behavior that we see changing is what kind of makes this panel, this day, really exciting in terms of really seeing what this technology is doing to change kind of the face of retail as we've seen it.
Hi, my name is Pfeifer, and I oversee the account management group out of the West Coast for Usablenet, based out of our Santa Monica office. Usablenet is a mobile and multi-channel technology platform. We're working with about 350 clients, about 20% of the Fortune 1000. What we work with our clients to expand them into multi-channel, so mobile, tablets, native apps, in-store kiosk, and really create unique experiences in each of those channels.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy Wasser. I'm VP of Mobile for Experian's Consumer Services Business Unit. My team is responsible for mobilizing our direct-to-consumer and business-to-business portfolio. That includes flagship brands like FreeCreditScore.com and FreeCreditReport.com, also in the credit space. In the identity protection and solutions space, it also includes sites like ProtectMyID.com. We also white label some of those services for partners such as American Express, Discover, USAA. I've been in the mobile industry for about 10 years now. Started off at a company called Moviso that was responsible for powering a lot of the carrier content portals in the early 2000s. So monophonic ringtones and black and white graphics, and then from there I went to Warner Brothers and was working in video services, and then also have done some social media, social networking applications and services at companies like Helio / Virgin Mobile / Sprint. A lot of consolidation in the industry. So my background's primarily on the digital media side. I've been again at Experian for about a year now, and so now I'm in financial services, but still obviously very heavily focused on mobile.
Awesome. So let's talk about the consumer context. I mean, along the way this morning, we've already talked about some technologies that create different considerations. But let's step back and think about the consumer context that those technologies now introduce. So maybe Brett, you can start us off with talking about what are the new consumer contexts that you now need to consider for your clients when it comes to mobile experiences.
Some of this has been said, Mark from Verizon and others, that and the Forresters and Gartners, all those reports that all of us read, that context will be the driver, or what will be the linchpin for success for a lot of commerce. And we agree, I'm sure a lot of us agree as well, is how do we take advantage of that when the mom with 2 kids has her smartphone and she needs to make a decision as she's driving right, to go buy something at the store, right? Or I'm in the aisle, right? Does the form factor determine whether they're probably on a smartphone versus a tablet because it's just a little bit too big, unwieldy? Therefore, when they scan that UPC code, right, we can serve up particular content to them in that context. We know where they are. And so all that, plays, and I won't beat that topic down too far. But the context from a design perspective, the way we look at it, it goes far beyond that destination site or app that we're designing, right? So if I'm building a mobile site for Goodyear Tire, right? We've built one now, right? We need to go back to the consumer experience or what we know about the consumer, right? We know that people buy tires once every 4 years, right? We got to get them in that moment. So things like search, right? They get the flat tire, they're searching for dealers, things like that. All of you agencies have planners, connection planners, things like that. All that research gets done up front. But then we think about, right, what does that design mean in terms of how is it going to manifest itself? Whether it's in an app, right? Do we just do Google search, right? We're making investment decisions instead of destinations, right? And we'll start to make those trade-offs. And so before we get into this particular design elements, we're thinking about what makes sense from a destination experience. Is one really needed? Are there other things that we can do? Are partnerships more relevant in this case? Because they can give us scale. And so that's just kind of a Kickstarter, if you will.
Maybe I also want to comment on and bring tablet into that, because I think that was a smartphone-focused kind of example. How do tablets, from a mobile standpoint, introduce new consumer contexts to consider from a UX standpoint?
Well, I think it's, and again, some of it has been talked about before, but it's the first computer that's been designed to be used while slouching, or in bed, right? And I think that has massive implications on your design and how you think about that, right? Like suddenly it's I'm laying back, I'm not, I'm not leaning forward, although I am as engaged in it as I may have been with a laptop or a smartphone. But it also, I think that, just speaking kind of from my own experience, and this is dangerous, right? Like the focus group of one, but I know that when I'm sitting in front of the TV, the tablet is out all the time. Sometimes I'm doing email, sometimes I'm shopping, sometimes I'm looking up information about the show that I'm watching. But if I am shopping, it's so convenient to just be able to pass that right to my wife and have a discussion about what it is that we're looking at there, right? And I think that's an interesting sort of contextual thing that I haven't really seen anybody figure out, right? Like how do you do that sort of collaborative shopping, couch shopping thing on a tablet yet? Some apps are starting to get there, but I think that's an interesting one.
Else?
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. I mean, I think I think tying those experiences together is really important, right? So you may originate the purchase process on a tablet, right? And it's important to have that experience be unique and appropriate and dynamic for the tablet, right? So you might have bigger product images, different pagination. The customer is in a dreaming and exploratory phase there. But if they add something to a wish list or to their shopping cart and then pick up their mobile phone, well, you want it to be there too, and you want them to be able to hand off and take up that experience at that point. Or if they then walk into your retail store and maybe interact with a kiosk like what we did for Marks and Spencer, and you want them to be able to access their shopping cart or their wish list there, because they may actually complete the purchase at a kiosk, have originated it on a tablet, and somewhere in between looked at it or played with it on their mobile phone.
How do you connect, or how do your clients connect those experiences across devices? So you mentioned kiosk, we mentioned tablet, we mentioned phone. What's a good example of a customer or a brand or retailer who's actually done that? Multiple devices, multiple channels, and made it one coherent, consistent user experience?
I haven't seen one, to be honest. I mean, maybe I'm
shame on us then.
Well, it's clients are
It's
just
hard.
getting the idea that smartphone and tablet are two different behaviors. No one's doing red laser on their iPad in store. No one's scanning a QR code of their tablet in a store. People are sitting at home, like you had mentioned, leaning back. There are certain applications that are built for iPad now. So whether it's, let's say, Gilt or Fab, that create a long-term kind of engagement. Because if you think about the app experience in terms of shopping on a tablet versus a browser, when you're on a browser, common behavior is you're switching between destinations. You know, you're jumping all over the place. I mean, at least in my, again, dangerous focus group of one, I find myself opening a different tab each time to compare one retailer with another. But in an app environment, you're a little bit more engaged, and you stay within that app for a longer period of time. Like Monogram, that's going to be out, is the flipboard of commerce, right? But in terms of connecting that tablet to smartphone to brick and mortar to pick it up, I don't know if you guys have, but I haven't seen anybody that's really mastered that process yet.
Yeah, I actually, I have a fair number of examples. I mean, I mentioned Marks and Spencer before. I think that's a great example, a great omni-channel strategy there. As I mentioned, mobile web, mobile apps, iPhone, Android, also in-store kiosks. So they have 36 and 42-inch touchscreen devices.
So you talk about in that example, what differs in the UX between those different devices?
A lot. I would say each one of those channels is entirely unique. It's not predicated on the idea that, okay, we're going to take the website and now just extend it to a different screen size. So, you know, we're mashing up experiences there with Marks and Spencer, where they're bringing in social feeds and third-party APIs. Another great example is actually Fashion Week. We powered their mobile experience, and what they wanted to do was do a social tuner. So for the mobile user, you can scroll between Pinterest, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook feeds. So a very different experience than what they had on their full site, but a great mobile experience nonetheless.
Just one other example that I've seen recently. I was in Chicago last week, and on Michigan Avenue, AT&T has a new flagship store, experiential store that they've opened. And we did some of the software work that went in there. And I had seen it from sort of the agency perspective, but I went in as a consumer and played around with it, and it was really engaging. And you know, it's kind of this mix of omni-channel. There's big touch screens, 42-inch touch screens that you can play with. You know, explore different AT&T and related products, add them to a favorite list. It's got NFC and QR on all of the touch screens, so if you've got an NFC phone, you can just tap and it'll synchronize, and anything you favorite on the touch screen will get downloaded to the phone, and then you can take that and have a conversation with an expert, you know, an AT&T employee in the back of the room, and figure out how that adds to your plan or not. And so one of the interesting sort of UX challenges, though, is there's also this gigantic video wall in there that is probably, I don't know, 15 feet high by 20 feet wide or something. And you know, one of the challenges with that is that when you get to that big of a scale, touch stops working, right? Because like, A, I can't reach to 10 feet, and B, I'm not going to be dragging something, you know, 15, right, yeah. So it becomes primarily gesture-driven, right? And just sort of, it's interesting to see that this sort of differences in what you need to do from a UX perspective in that environment.
Just to build on what Jeremy's talking about, and what you mentioned about omni-channel, right, or omnipresence, right? This idea that we can create this seamless experience across all these touch points, right? And for most of us, we've got, you know, the Facebook, the Pinterest, right? There could be a buy button. We've got mobile, we've got in-store, and how do we kind of tie those together? It's difficult. Whether the organizations we're dealing with have, right, siloed design ideas, or we have different designers internally building pieces and get them to all come together. But I will say that at least our jobs in terms of UX and design is, how do we take it from, is the staff educated at the target, right? So when I put the QR codes out there, there's proper instructions and people know how to use it, step one, right? Once they scan it, obviously the experience, all of that is part of a user experience with that mobile commerce, from the physical in-store to all the way through the advocacy, I would argue.
So I'll chime in that from my perspective, one of the things that's most exciting about mobile today is that we have an opportunity to reach the customer in the store with the phone, but the tablet in that slouch form factor, which I love. I mean, that creates a whole new context where marketers can reach your customers way earlier than we have been heretofore with digital advertising. So Google's done a great job of attracting 30% of the U.S. marketing spend, basically, because you can capture them at Google at the point of demand. When somebody wants something, that's when you advertise on Google. The other 70% of the time, we still send catalogs, we still advertise in newspapers and billboards, because you got to create demand somehow. You got to get them to want something. And the tablet, I think, is a new digital device that gets where you can reach an audience and create that demand. And that's an opportunity to do that first, and then connect it to all these other experiences that we're talking about here. So let me switch gears and talk about multiple devices, technology, lots of considerations. When I started on mobile 10 years ago, it was really complicated. Then a couple years ago, Apple made it really simple with a single magical device, the iPhone and iOS. It feels like it's getting messy again. So Apple will announce the iPad mini tomorrow. Microsoft launches Windows 8. Android's out there. God forbid if anybody's considering WebOS from HP still. But there's all this stuff out there, and I don't know what to do when I'm thinking about my mobile strategy. So at that level, just technology, it's complicated. What do how do you think about that for your clients, for yourself? Maybe Jeremy, you can start for your own strategy.
Sure. And I can start with a quick anecdote. I was at when I was at Virgin Mobile when Apple introduced the App Store. So obviously, iPhone had already been out for a year. The execs started running around. Well, I shouldn't say the execs. There was an exec who was running around saying, "We need an App Store. We need an App Store. We need an App Store." And coming from the product team, we were looking around the room saying, "We've had an App Store for 3 years. It just isn't called App Store." So part of it's marketing and part of it's technology. So anyway, but from a platform standpoint, for us, it's really about identifying that core critical set of use cases and really identifying the what and the why, and focusing on again what you're trying to accomplish in mobile first, and then trying to architect solutions across the different platforms that make sense. And it gets really granular. I mean, people talk a lot. I know there's been some discussion here already about responsive design, and then you talk about iPhone versus iPad versus Android, and then even more granular than that, is it are you talking about purely native apps or hybrid or WebView apps? I think when you start, and at the risk of oversimplifying, if you start with what your goals are, so if it's an acquisition, if you're talking about acquisition and just the purchase flow, then you're really talking about how to improve conversion, drive conversion, make that purchase process as frictionless as possible. And so there are things you can do in mobile web, for instance, that you may not be able to do in native applications, and there are trade-offs to be made between time to market and cost and what have you. But for us, on the acquisition side, we tend to focus more on the mobile web, and then for engagement, retention, and stickiness, and driving customer lifetime value, it's there's a lot more emphasis on native applications.
So native application, we've decided that we want to focus on that engagement piece of it. Do I have to go across? Do I have to launch with multiple device platforms, or can I just focus on one? How do you advise? How do you decide for yourself, and how do you advise clients on that front?
I can start there too if you want. So, I think and this probably isn't. This is obvious to everyone in the room, but obviously iPhone, iPad, and Android are the dominant platforms today. So that's where the emphasis has been for us. You hear a lot about what Microsoft's doing, and they've got a massive backlog of cash. What is it, $100 billion or whatever it happens to be. So I think they're well equipped to attack this problem, and so we may be talking a lot more about Windows 8 and the Surface tablet and what have you in the next couple of years. But for us right now, the focus has been purely on iPhone, iPad, and Android, and again, mobile innately is more fragmented than desktop. So you got to pick your battles, and I think that's where we've chosen to start.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And for us, it's about understanding the objectives and the consumer, right? And just are they primarily on iOS? Are they primarily on Android? Is it a mix? Because it does kind of skew. We had one client where they thought that everybody was on iOS, and then we were like, well, let's look at your server logs. And it turns out, like 75% are coming from Android. So, having those kind of conversations and just really understanding the consumer helps to prioritize those things. I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it's got to be a multi-platform approach. And you mentioned the three that are definitely the focus. but just understanding the consumer and how that maps to your objectives helps the prioritization exercise.
In that example where majority of the customers were Android for mobile web, did the client see the same mix when it came to actually downloads for the apps?
That's a good question. So we actually wound up, based on that, and some other things, wound up building an application that got deployed on Android first and on iOS afterwards. And at the end of the day, Android actually outpaced iOS just because of the sheer volume of who their target was.
That's actually interesting because I don't think people take the time to look at that. I don't think I think they just assume that whether it's web-based or application-based, that iOS is where they need to build first, and then there's a 6-month lag, and they don't identify really what's truly happening behind the scenes. They don't identify what their true behavior is. It's kind of it's that shiny object syndrome that everybody gets into, and it's also just in my opinion, taking the easy way out because it is more difficult to build for Android because of that fragmentation. But the reality is they still have a little bit bigger of a piece of the market share, at least on smartphone, not on tablet, obviously. But brands need to think about both. They need to think about Windows, not so much BlackBerry, not WebOS. And what was the other one? That was it, right?
WebOS, yeah.
We thrown some other strange thing?
No,
That's it?
WebOS is strange enough.
I don't think there's any excuse anymore for companies to not use data to drive their designs, right? We know clickstream paths, and whether it's from the web or maybe you had the mobile site up first, or people were going to your existing PC site on their iOS devices, and you could see what they were doing, right? Store locators, store hours, right? From a commerce perspective, we knew what they were doing, right? Very intent-driven behavior. We know the devices that they have, right? 10% of all of our traffic's coming from iOS. Like, there was no reason, at least not anymore, to make decisions about where are we going to go, or not have the ability to make smart decisions of what to start with or what to reinforce or drop, things like that.
Let's bring in audience quickly. How many of you manage for yourself or for your client a mobile experience? And how many of you have an iOS app? Almost all of you. How many of you an Android app? And how many of you plan to invest into a Windows 8 app this fall? We have 2. Awesome. Hey, that's amazing. So let me channel Steve Ballmer.
It's going to be deployed, across all things, right? Like, It's not just smartphones and tablets. Like, it's going to be the desktop operating system.
Let me channel Steve Ballmer for one moment.
Console.
Windows 8 is going to be huge. I've got $1.5 billion I'm going to spend in the next 2 months. It's amazing. Touch. Dices, 400 million of them. You've got to invest right now. Be early because nobody else is there. That's literally his pitch. It's
Well
amazing.
done.
There's no start button anymore, though.
It's confusing. Yes, it is confusing. I don't know where to go without the Rolling Stones telling me where to go. So that's really interesting. I think they actually have a very compelling pitch. As a startup, I'm actually honestly considering it. Have you found any situations where it actually makes sense to actually consider a third platform like Windows 8?
Listen, I mean, it's 8, 1 through 7. So,
Come on, 7 wasn't that bad.
no, it wasn't. But they peaked on the Motorola Q. If it connects, the interesting thing about Windows is it's going to get me into my living room. So for a brand, that's the intriguing thing because the Xbox. No, it's not mobile, but in terms of Windows as a platform, the Xbox opens up a living room to a lot of people. And if we're talking about connected TVs, and that is the interesting part of it. As a mobile-only platform, no.
I think, I'm sorry.
No.
It's going to be driven by consumer adoption, of course, right? So, I think a lot of brands are going to take a wait and see what happens with the adoption. What I think is really interesting about the way that Microsoft is approaching this is that two things. One is, as everybody knows, they're unifying the UI across everything, right? Desktop, tablet, smartphone, and Xbox. To your point, right? And I think it's high time that somebody did that, right? And the only thing that surprises me is that it was Microsoft that was the first one to do that. And so kudos, right? Like, I think it's high time, and that's fantastic. So that, I think, is really interesting. And I think we're going to see more and more of that sort of convergence of the UI across platforms. as we move forward. And then the second thing that I think is really interesting is the way that they're evangelizing Windows 8 as an ad platform. So we were one of, I think, 5 agencies to be invited into this co-ideation process with them. And we've been working with them since May of this year to help them create unique ad formats for Windows 8. And it's been fantastic, right? And to have somebody on the publisher or platform side like that reach out and engage the agencies early on to help sort of define what the product offering is going to be from an advertising and media perspective is huge, right? Like, Apple didn't really do that when they launched iAd, right? And it's been really fun and valuable to be part of that process. So I think they've got kind of 2 things going for them from at least from the media side of the house.
Yeah, go. Yeah. Jeremy.
Should I raise my hand? Sorry. So the other side of it is, Microsoft's actually been pretty aggressively subsidizing app development for a lot of their app development partners. So whether or not you can get in front of them as a startup, it may help. It may make sense to start with with Windows 8. If obviously if that's a consideration, but that's again one thing to take one thing to consider. So obviously from a pure market share standpoint today, iPhone, iPad, Android, that makes the most sense. But if cash is a consideration or an issue, and you have the ability to get in front of them, maybe that's an alternative. Is to start or lead with that platform just to get the plumbing in place and get your your infrastructure together and what have you, and then you can obviously leverage all of that work across the other platforms. Because for any cloud-based service today, there's going to be a lot of reuse on the back end. So.
It's pretty impressive. If you want to build an app today, you want to build for Apple, good luck getting a response from them. We're all blessed to be able to be on Apple's platform, basically. If you want to launch Android, there's nobody there. It's just like an email address. But amazingly, if you want to launch on Windows 8, there's a team eager to talk to you. It's like walking into an empty shop and there's a store clerk just waiting to sell you something. They actually have human beings at Microsoft, so they really are putting billions of dollars behind it. So to the last point you made about leveraging common plumbing across, we were talking about apps now, let's talk about web, because whenever we talk about Android and Microsoft 8, Windows 8, usually the first approach is take a website or a web experience and wrap it. Responsive design is kind of the solution for that from a UX standpoint. Anybody actually see that work successfully in an m-commerce experience?
I know you're ready to jump in on this, but within our agency, we were looking around to see if there was a major retailer in the United States that had done it, and we couldn't find any yet. Maybe somebody knows, but so we found Curry's in the UK. I guess it's like a Best Buy equivalent. It has a nice responsive design. And so we started asking the question, why is it that we haven't seen? And I don't think it's a technical one, right? Those of you that are more technical savvy better understand that. It may come down to you've got deep investment that has gone into your existing e-commerce platforms, right? Or the amount of time, effort, and resources it takes to embark upon responsive, right? For those of you who may have started that, it's very intensive up front, a lot of wireframing and heavy design. It's a massive content approach strategy more than anything, right? And so I don't know if those e-commerce companies are probably all starting to think about it, but it takes some time to roll it out, for sure.
Yeah, I think, I think one of the key benefits of the responsive approach is centralizing, web marketing. Somebody told me once, if you want people to work well together, you put them under the same boss. And, I think that, but I think we haven't seen it because it's not a silver bullet. It's part of the solution, and it will certainly need to evolve. But at the end of the day, I think, as I mentioned before, the challenge is to create a unique experience in each channel, and responsive design isn't great for that. You want to optimize for each channel, and responsive design isn't great for that. So I think that to the extent that it can help you scale your approach, and from an organizational standpoint, and maybe even from a asset or content standpoint. But from a technology and a marketing standpoint, I just don't think it's a silver bullet.
Yeah, like the theory of responsive design is brilliant, right? But I think you're exactly right. I think in practice, there are a lot of challenges with it. And Mark from Verizon was talking about the importance of load time and things like that, right? And responsive design has huge implications around load time and overall performance, right? And particularly when you're talking about commerce and sort of the need for speed, it can be challenging. So I think that's probably one of the drivers, behind the lack of m-commerce driven by responsive design.
Anybody seen an m-commerce experience driven by responsive design? I feel like responsive design is, from a web standpoint, mobile web standpoint, is the hot topic. It's the silver bullet that everybody talks about. So I actually.
Maybe some WordPress blogs, they offer RWD, but I don't have any.
Commerce, though, not just publishing. I mean, there's a variety of publishing sites that do it. But.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's part of the problem that
commerce.
too many retailers focus on the app experience and neglect the web experience. And the ironic thing is that a lot of retailer apps tend to look like nothing more than a screenshot of their desktop site. And they have poor functionality. And I mean, if you think of it, we always talk to our clients about it as the same experience you would want in a creative execution on an iPad, for instance. Is users, when you sit back at home, wherever you are and you're engaging with content, there's a reason why Flipboard is such a successful application, is because it's built perfectly for that dynamic interface, for this great user experience. Brands aren't thinking about that necessarily. They're not, and maybe part of it is that we need to do a better job reinforcing what the experiences need to be like, instead of the shopping cart solution. Just the functionality, the use. I mean, it's pushing the same ideas again with creative. Is the last thing you want to see if you want to interact with a brand through a creative level is a static banner, a static 728 by 90. You want to see something that's more compelling, whether it's an iAd execution or something else. It's the same thing that goes in the retail environment. But I think brands are still slow to adopt, because we're still talking about a 5-year-old platform, and in the tablet space, even a younger platform. And some brands are just slower to adopt.
Yeah, just quickly, I was going to say, I think responsive design is just one tool that we have at our disposal, and excuse me, and there are elements or areas of your site where it makes sense to leverage those techniques. As an example, you mentioned publishers, and any more content focused or content driven areas of the site would make sense. But again, if your goal or objective is to get through the shopping cart and convert as quickly as possible, then with the additional overhead, and again, there's trade-offs to be made, but with the additional overhead of responsive design, probably doesn't make the most sense.
I feel like we have a very frank and honest panel here, because it strikes me that responsive design is a great opportunity for an agency to sell a big project to customers. It requires setup. Before you can get the benefits of it. What are examples of device-specific capabilities that are worth breaking from a consistent cross-device experience in design? Because it feels like responsive design, the whole idea is, well, let's manage across multiple, but you're beholden to a common capability of the device underneath it, and what breaks it is the device-specific capabilities. So what are examples of them?
We look to the camera as that one utility that is becoming quickly at the forefront of arguably one of the most important utilities you have in the shopping process, right? ComScore tells us that the number one thing that people do in stores, retail stores, is take pictures of products, right? It's an opportunity there, right? Mobile imaging, right? Scan driver's license in the acquisition process, scanning UPC codes, et cetera, et cetera. You look at, many of you with Red Laser may have scanned something in a store, and you'll see that Amex pops up, right? The membership rewards integration piece there, right? Get that suitcase for 65,000 points, deep link you into the MR commerce experience, right? All just with the camera, right? Very visual. We're visual people. We live in a visual world, and so I would make the case for that.
I think the camera is a great one. I think GPS as well. The ability for you to know where your customer is and then serve them a different experience based on that. So we did with Ritz-Carlton, this is their app only, an on-property mode. So it knows if you're in Ritz-Carlton, you have digital concierge service, you have a city guide, and I think obviously the retail applications of that are limitless.
So start thinking of questions to ask. We'll field them in a minute or when you want, actually. No UX focused panel would be complete without a conversation around gamification. So Shopkick, I feel like, is a company that really made waves in the last couple of years around m-commerce and the gamification of the in-store experience. I've been personally a skeptic for a long time, and it's been satisfying to see Shopkick this past week say, never mind, the whole gamification thing, in-store at least, not really what we want to do, and we basically, they relaunched their product completely different. Any examples where gamification actually is working in a mobile context, and where it makes sense from a UX standpoint, where you work for your own business or with clients, where gamification really has accomplished the goals you set out for?
You know, this isn't an exact, this isn't necessarily gamification, but just because it's timely and relevant, Aeropostale launched the ability to be able to vote on the songs you're listening to in the store while you shop and while you get dressed, and so I think that level of interaction and engagement, is there's not a game element and you don't score points, but you get to affect the experience and you have control over that experience.
I like that.
I moderated a panel in Chicago last week, and the first question I asked was for everybody on the panel to nominate something that gets a lot of hype and is fake, and something that gets a lot of hype and is real. And somebody
You're stealing the last question.
Somebody actually threw. Well, we can go through it. But one of the answers for something that gets a lot of hype and is fake is gamification, and I thought it was a great point. So it's not surprising, to your point, to see Shopkick kind of walk away from that. It can work in certain pockets, and like we've done some campaigns that have had elements of it that have worked pretty well. But I don't know if everything. I don't know if consumers want to turn everything into a game.
I think we're replacing the idea that we try to integrate gamification and just going with traditional marketers know what works, and that is loyalty programs and all that heavy lifting in the back end with CRM and things like clienteling popping up, right, with the devices in the hands of the Nordstrom rep or Lowe's, and we're getting back to that, right? Some of the trinkets of the new mobile age, like gamification in the shopping process, are being replaced with personalization, loyalty offers, et cetera.
So we'll end with top overhyped mobile trend, but before we get there, any questions from the audience? Sounds like we do have one.
Yeah, Michelangelo Cordano, UXer. I found responsive web design with a card, and Smashing Magazine, they have it. So I tested on my Android and my 2 OS, and it's working fine. So, 1.
Wait, who was that?
Smashing Magazine. Starbucks too. So 2.
Sorry, Sorry, can you say it again?
Smashing Magazine.
Smashing Magazine. Okay, thank you. Publisher, not m-commerce experience. Sounds like. But Starbucks, I didn't know about Starbucks. But it's ironic that Starbucks has it, because Starbucks has probably one of the most widely adopted mobile apps out there for commerce. So that's interesting. Any other comments or questions from the audience? Yeah.
Ron Cohen, Networks. On the topic of responsive design, there was a discussion earlier of web versus app. Any of you gentlemen have any experience with dealing with responsive design on the app side and the fragmentation of the Android world, covering all these different devices? Do you understand my question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Throwing the wrapper around the mobile experience, the hybrid experience, and dealing with fragmentation of the device. Anybody have a positive experience with that? How do you? This is the problem with Android, right? That there's multiple form factors, device capabilities, even just screen sizes. Other than just saying, well, deal with it all, what's the right starting point for a client to think about? How do you simplify that problem for the client?
You talking about specific to Android?
Well, I think that's the relevant one when you think about hybrid applications.
Well, doesn't that clarify? It doesn't have to be hybrid. Just iOS, they pretty much take care of it. But on Android, you've got 100 plus device platforms that your UI has to handle. So how do you guys?
Sorry, go ahead. We try to break it down into categories, right? Like there is massive fragmentation, but you can categorize them into probably 6 or 8, kind of lowest common denominator shapes and sizes and resolutions that get you, 70% of the way there. So that helps. It's not the silver bullet, but it's a good starting point.
Yeah, at previous companies, we had established a set of maybe 3 to 5 reference sizes, and unfortunately, obviously with the iPhone, you don't have this challenge, but Android specifically, you know, the different flavors of, you know, for different devices. But, you know, as you said, if you've got 100 different devices to try to adapt to, it's a pretty challenging problem to attack. So, you know, if you start with a few reference sizes and go from there, I think that's one approach.
So 30 seconds left. Top overhyped mobile trend. Go down the line.
QR codes.
NFC for payments.
That's the whole next panel.
Sorry.
I'll throw an augmented reality for me.
You guys taking everything. No filters on Instagram. It's not related to commerce. I just think it's stupid. I mean, the whole thing's a filter. That's it.
I'm going to say responsive design.
That's cheating.
Yeah. Why did I have to go last on this? So I was going to say NFC and responsive design, so those would be my two.
Together.
Yeah, together. Not mobile payments as a whole, but NFC as a method, as a data bearer for mobile payments.
Ben, panel, thanks very much.